The spookiest time of year is quickly approaching, and if you're looking for a gory movie marathon, you could do a lot worse than the Friday the 13th series. Friday may not be the father of the slasher genre, but it's definitely the crazy uncle, and the unstoppable Jason Vorhees' signature hockey mask is now one of the most recognizable icons in American pop culture. For newcomers and hardcore fans alike, we're running down every Friday the 13th movie ranked from worst to best. After sprinting past the events of the original film, the 2009 reboot moves on to an adult Jason with an intelligent, cunning characterization that seemed like a pointless change, if not an outright betrayal of the original series. Jason's seemingly supernatural abilities are neatly explained away, callbacks to the previous films fall ridiculously flat, and Jason captures a girl and holds her prisoner, as if it'd ever bother with mere kidnapping. The film had a so-so performance at the box office, but earned dismal reviews, and a lengthy tug-of-war over rights issues helped sink another attempt at a reboot. This film simply shouldn't exist. Even the worst entry from the original series is preferable. On that note, just one in a long line of films that were meant to end the series, Jason Goes to Hell: The Final Friday undoes the mythology built by the previous entries, reinventing Jason as a vengeful spirit that can only be killed by members of his own bloodline using a special magic dagger. After being killed by the FBI in the beginning, Jason spends most of the movie as a spirit, possessing random people by forcibly installing his heart into their chest cavities. Its only notable moments come at the very end, when an appearance by a familiar knife-gloved hand sets up a much better movie that wouldn't show up for another decade. A film that definitely fails to live up to its title, 1989's Friday the 13th Part 8 Jason Takes Manhattan, benefits only from the presence of Kane Hodder in his second turn as the man behind the mask. A ridiculous amount of the movie takes place in the confines of a cruise ship, while Jason's actual romp through the Big Apple takes up perhaps 20 minutes at the movie's end.
You don't understand, there is a maniac trying to kill us. Welcome to New York.
Of course, director Rob Hedden had intended something very different. As he explained in a making-of book, Jason was supposed to murder his way through all sorts of iconic New York locations before jumping off the Statue of Liberty, but the measly $5 million budget wouldn't allow for any of that. Instead of that awesome-sounding movie, we got one of the most visually flat, tedious entries in the entire series. Every long-running horror franchise eventually embarrasses itself by sending its villain into space, so it's only fitting that the final proper installment of the original Friday the 13th series would do just that. After being captured by the government, Jason is placed into cryogenic stasis for hundreds of years. Revived by some students, he wreaks his special brand of havoc on a spaceship, receives an insane cyborg upgrade, and is once again seemingly dispatched for good. Despite its silly premise, 2001's Jason X is surprisingly solid, with a ferocious performance by Hodder in his final outing, and at least a couple of the series' most truly bizarre and inventive kills. A late film sequence featuring cyborg Jason in a holodeck-like recreation of Camp Crystal Lake is also a nice touch, and features a remixed version of what Hodder called his favorite kill of all time, which just so happens to be featured in the next entry. Despite being little remembered, 1988's Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood, is noteworthy for marking Kane Hodder's debut as Jason, and also for the infamous sleeping bag scene. The film's protagonist is Tina Shepard, a telekinetic young woman who inadvertently revives Jason from his watery grave at the bottom of Crystal Lake while trying to bring her drowned father back to life. Many fans felt that the Jason vs. Carrie premise was a bit of a stretch, but Hodder held the film together, and he even helped the film set a record for stunt work. In the film's climactic battle, Tina uses her powers to set Jason on fire, a scene that was achieved by having Hodder actually be on fire for a whopping 40 seconds as the cameras rolled. His dedication to the role showed early, and his hot performance helps make The New Blood a solid entry. It wasn't until 2003 that fans' hopes on the promise made in the last few frames of Jason Goes to Hell were finally fulfilled. Fortunately, the movie of fans' nightmares ended up being worth the years-long wait. While it isn't actually part of the main Friday the 13th franchise, the crossover Freddy vs. Jason earns its place on the list by virtue of being so awesomely over the top. A Nightmare on Elm Street's Freddy Krueger is bummed that his memory among the living is dying out, making it harder for him to invade the dreams of children. He decides to free Jason Vorhees from hell and turn him loose on his old Elm Street stomping grounds in the hopes that the fresh wave of gruesome murders will rekindle the legend of Freddy. But once Jason starts killing, it's pretty tough to get him to stop, so Freddy maneuvers Jason into a showdown before he can kill off all of Freddy's potential victims. The film works far better than it has any right to after spending an eternity in development hell. The franchise's styles mesh well, and there are a couple of genuinely creepy moments amidst the carnage. The fifth film in the series, 1985's Friday the 13th: A New Beginning, is a near-perfect Friday the 13th film that fans absolutely hate for one totally understandable reason. The ending of the movie reveals that the Jason who's been killing his way through a teen rehab facility wasn't ever actually Jason at all, but just some random guy, specifically a paramedic, upset over the death of his son early in the film. Okay. The Jason copycat's weak motivation was especially disappointing considering the interesting psychological thriller angle the film takes before the reveal. A now teenage Tommy Jarvis, who as a child put a brutal end to Jason's reign of terror with the murderer's own machete, is among the residents at a home for troubled teens when the murders begin anew. The implication that Tommy may be responsible for his new round of mayhem is teased throughout, and his ultimate face-off of the Jason copycat is truly nerve-jangling. But for most fans, the fake-out ending wasted all the goodwill the movie engendered with its crazy kills and high body count. It all makes A New Beginning a very good franchise entry with one king-sized flaw that ultimately shouldn't keep it from being enjoyed. The third entry in the Friday the 13th franchise had the misfortune of being produced in 1982, smack in the middle of the early 80s 3D revival. But if you can get past all the unnecessary 3D shots that only exist to throw something at the audience, Part 3 is a tight, suspenseful shocker that features some jaw-dropping kills and sees Jason put on his iconic hockey mask for the first time. The film's plot is nothing special. Jason kills a bunch of teenage friends and their biker gang rivals. Producers toyed with the idea of definitively ending the franchise with this entry, scripting a conclusion in which Jason's head is lopped off by protagonist Chris. But ultimately, Jason's fate is left hanging after a nightmarish false ending that illustrates how fake-out dream sequences should be done. At a scant 87 minutes, 1981's Friday the 13th Part 2 is short, dark, and efficient. When the carnage starts, it comes fast and furious. The movie wastes no time in ceremoniously dispatching Alice, the sole survivor of the first film, within its first few minutes. This installment's Jason is a mute, ferocious beast, and the means by which he's defeated, confusing him by invoking the memory of his dead mother, would become a reliable means of at least slowing him down in future entries in the series. Despite the departure of the first film's special effects wizard Tom Savini, Part 2 offered death sequences creative enough to invoke the wrath of the MPAA, who insisted that a total of 48 seconds be cut to avoid an X rating. It's still a brutal, relentlessly paced entry and a worthy sequel to one of the greatest slasher films of all time. The film that launched a seemingly unstoppable franchise is actually more of a murder mystery than most of the slasher flicks it inspired. The third act revealed that the killer is former camp cook Mrs. Voorhees, driven insane by the drowning death of her weirdo son Jason, was absolutely jaw-dropping, as was her ultimate fate, thanks to the film's special effects genius Tom Savini. According to director Sean Cunningham, Savini obsessed endlessly over how to accomplish Mrs. Voorhees' death scene, and he also designed a young Jason's look for his surprise appearance at the end. Friday the 13th was a film born of pure money-making opportunism, but Savini's groundbreaking makeup effects work turned it into a horror classic. Of course, it also doesn't hurt that the performance of veteran actress Betsy Palmer as Mrs. Voorhees is super creepy.
Kill her, Mommy! Kill her!
The second best film in the franchise has it all. Tons of campy kills, skin-crawling scares, and great performances all around. The film opens with a delirious sequence in which Tommy Jarvis literally digs up Jason's grave on a stormy night, impales the corpse with an iron stake from the cemetery's fence, and angrily tosses a hockey mask and machete into the grave.
Yeah, f*** you, Jason.
Anybody who's ever seen Frankenstein can guess what happens next. There's a freak lightning strike, and a newly reanimated Jason, an explicitly supernatural being for the first time in the series, goes on a killing spree. The opening sets a self-referential tone that continues throughout the movie, successfully making audiences laugh between the jump scares and brutal murders. The film is simply a blast, the body count is absurdly high, and stuntman CJ Graham is second only to Kane Hodder in his menacing portrayal of Jason. It's almost the best Friday the 13th ever. Almost. As the name suggests, the fourth installment of the series was indeed intended to be the final one, and if it had been, the franchise may have had a completely different legacy. The film begins with Jason escaping the morgue and getting set to embark on another rampage, before finally meeting his match in an unlikely adversary. Jason's soon-to-be longtime nemesis Tommy Jarvis makes his first appearance as a 12-year-old, played by a young Corey Feldman. Tommy ends up saving his sister's life in the film's nerve-wracking climax, one of the most intense and graphic final scenes in any mainstream horror film. Ask any truly hardcore fan and they'll tell you, the final chapter is a quintessential Friday the 13th film. Unbelievably brutal and at times unbearably tense. It's not only the best film in the franchise, but one of the greatest slasher films ever. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more Looper videos about your favorite stuff are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.